Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hembree, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Mark Hembree to Got Grass today. Welcome, sir. Hello. So just to make sure everybody knows, I've got Mr. Mark Hembree on the podcast today. Welcome, Mark.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I usually start out these episodes by asking people what is a perfect day off like for you, without music, without the bass. What's a day off like for Mark?
I guess I love going to the ball game anytime, baseball.
Okay.
And a few years ago, when my wife and I were discussing, things that we could do together, because you get busy and you develop your own things, and so football was absolutely out of the question for her. But she said, I wasn't going to be like becoming a gardener. I'll haul bags of dirt, but that's about it for me. And but we agreed on baseball, and so she set out to become a baseball fan. And I knew when the maternal instinct took over that she was hooked. And that's a great thing about baseball is it's individuals, and you can see all their faces. And she was, all that Ricky Weeks, he tries so hard. You could just tell he wants to do it because she's a teacher. So anyway, that was it. And then, that was sort of initial before she really got into the game. So it's about the only instance where she'll pause to let me explain something.
So too many couples can go to any kind of sports event together, and I know it's tough to find things that both people like. So that's pretty good. I wanted to mention, and this is the reason I actually got in touch with you, that I got your book called On the Bus with Bill Monroe for my daughters for Christmas, and I read it, and I read it right through in about an hour. I couldn't stop. It was so interesting. So everyone should buy this book, On the Bus with Bill Monroe by Mark Hembree. It's a fascinating story of your time with the Bluegrass Boys, 5 years. Back then, of course, the band was Kenny Baker on fiddle, Wayne Lewis on guitar and lead singer, and then Burch Robbins or Blake Williams on banjo, and of course, Mr. Monroe on mandolin. So I just want to recommend everyone get this book, library, buy it. It's a fascinating book, really good book. Well done. Are you still there?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, now I do. I hear you. Yep, I hear you. So you grew up in Wisconsin. Is that where you're living now, back there?
I grew up in Appleton, about a half hour away from Green Bay. And then I had bands, locally for a while. I mean, actually, depends on when you want to say I started, I guess, because I was in choir and then a school band. I didn't go very far on trombone, but my dad bought me a guitar when I was in 7th grade, and my mom blames the rest of it on him for that. And so I lived in Wisconsin, and then moved out to Denver and joined a um, a progressive bluegrass band called the Monroe Doctrine. Uh, and that was really, at that time there were other progressive bands around like Newgrass Revival or whatever, but it was still a fairly new or unusual thing. Uh, we were way ahead of our time. I'll say that we were a jam band before there ever was such a thing. And so that went on for a couple of years. And when that broke up, I moved back to Milwaukee. My wife's folks are from here. And so we moved back from Denver and lived in Milwaukee for about a year and a half, something like that. And that's when a friend of mine from New Jersey came to visit, and he was on his way through, and we decided to go out to this bluegrass festival. And that's where some guys in a band called Piper Road Spring Band here in Wisconsin had been down to Bill's Festival in Indiana a couple of weeks before that, and they came running up saying, "Hey, Randy Davis just left the band." Randy had been with Bill for about 5 years, and oh, you should go ask the old man for a job. And don't I don't think so. I got hair down in my waist, and um, and my buddy kind of pushed me. He said, "Why not go pick a few tunes with the father of bluegrass music? What's not to like? Why not?" So, well, okay, I tied my hair back best I could and went and talked to Bill. And I could see him looking at that ponytail. And I said, "Bill, I know this isn't how Bluegrass Boy dresses. I can get this cut in a second." He just nodded. "Can you come back tomorrow?" "Yes, sir." And so I went home that night and got a haircut and came back the next day and auditioned before their last set. And that went pretty well. Uh, and I knew what to do. Um, I knew Bill's music well enough, and I knew that Randy would be singing either baritone or bass. So when Bill asked if I could sing, I said, "Well, I can sing harmony." Uh, and um, so I picked out "It's a Beautiful Life" um, because that has answering parts. I didn't have to know all the words. So, and then it had a bass lead. So anyway, that was a good one to audition with. And then went back up to the top of the hill to watch Bill's set and sort of strategically positioned between there and the bus. And after the show, Burch Robbins came trotting by. He said, "Hey, if you've got a business card or something, you ought to give it to the old man. You might have a job." Yeah, my buddy's like, "Wow!" Yeah, so uh, I went and caught up with Bill, and this was a great thing. Just as I was walking up there, here comes this old timer, uh, guy named Bob Cranky, uh, who used to come around to the parties. My dad would have picking parties, and he would try to get me to play along. And at that time, like in junior high, high school, that didn't seem like a very cool thing. But yeah, I'll pull my guitar out. And so anyway, here's Bob, and he's cutting me off. I was like, "No, Bob." And so he gets to Monroe first and introduces himself. Yeah, the postmaster of Dale, Wisconsin. And, that was a pretty important thing to Bill. And they talked a little bit, and Bob said, then turned and he said, "Bill, I just wanted you to know I've known this boy ever since he was little. And I know his dad, and I know the family, and they're good people. And I've always thought he had a lot of talent, and I think he'd make a good man for your band. And Bill sort of smiled and nodded and shook his hand again. And then, so I had an on the spot job right there, which was nice.
Yeah. So
And
Bill was a man of kind of few words by that point, right? He didn't like to talk about too much, did he?
oh, I mean, once you got him going about something, or if he was really charged up about something, but yeah, he was, like um, country folks, kind of tight-lipped. Wasn't going to volunteer much, just right off. But anyway, I gave Bill my name and number, and uh, I didn't think anything more of it. I was working at a waterbed store in Milwaukee, and every time the phone would ring, that was the joke. Shh, it's Bill. And then one day the phone rang, and I went over and picked it up. And for some reason, the store manager jumped over and turned the radio off. And then it was like I was, pointing at the phone, mouthing, "It's Bill." And so he asked me, um, "When could you be down here?" And I said, "Well, I can check the flights tonight. I might be able to catch a plane." Uh, and he kind of chuckled. He said, "How would 2 weeks be?" I said, "2 weeks would be fine." And so he said, "Well, I want a man who'll work hard, and I want a sober man, and a man who'll be on time, and we'll just try it out and see how it goes." And I said, "I'll do my best. I'll be there." So anyway, that was that. I was just uh, amazed. I couldn't believe it, incredulous. Um,
So
and
do you remember your first actual gig playing with his band? I'm sure you do, but
oh yeah,
so
yeah,
what was that like? You were a young kid. These are all veteran guys. It must have been, I mean, you had balls, I'll say that.
yeah. Well, yeah, and I went in, really, really cold. I mean, Butch Robbins and I were, friendly enough when we roomed a bit, but we were never really buddy buddy. But he laughed about it. He said, "That's as cold as anyone could come in."
Hmm.
Uh, but the way that worked, the day that we were supposed to leave to go up to Stanton, Virginia, and play a show up there, and Bill said to be at the office at noon. So uh, I showed up at noon, and the bus didn't leave until 6. And so I came in, and Bill wasn't there when I arrived, and his ex-wife Carolyn was the secretary then, and she didn't have much use for me. I said, "Hi, I'm Mark Hembree. I'm the new bass player," and she kind of shrugged, like, "No, not my problem." And she just kind of looked up and said, "Well, he ain't here." "Oh, I see. Well, do you expect him sometime soon?" "Well, I reckon." Do you mind if I wait in here?" She just shrugged. So I sat there, and a little while later, Bill showed up and uh, got up and greeted him. And then he went over and uh, laid down on the couch and turned his back to me and took a nap. Uh, and so there I sat reading issues of Bluegrass Unlimited and uh, killed time till about 6 o'clock. All the boys in the band thought that was pretty funny. Uh, and anyway, we rode up to Virginia. We got up there. Even 6 o'clock was, really wasn't that far up to where we had to play, but uh, we got there probably before dawn. I woke up and everybody was gone. They'd gone into town to have breakfast, I guess, and so I walked around this fairgrounds and nothing was open. And matter of fact, I didn't get anything to eat at all until maybe a hot dog that afternoon when things opened up. And then finally, showtime came around and the boys started to get ready. So I just followed them and went and put on my shoes and shirt and tie and uh, took the bass backstage. And we warmed up for about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe. And that's how I went out. That's all the preparation I had. We had all day long, nobody talked to me, no rehearsal, nothing uh, until we hit the stage.
Was that their way of kind of saying, look, new guy, you're going to have to figure it out for yourself?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, Baker said this, and Bill would say it too, but, Baker'd say he ain't running no school here. Uh, he's not there to teach people how to play with him. Uh, and so, yeah, the other boy, it was strange to me uh, because every other band I'd ever been in, everybody was really friendly. Yeah, we had, maybe some disagreements or arguments or whatever, but mainly, everybody, they were good friends. And this was not that at all. Uh, they had no reason to even be friendly to me, or courteous for that matter. I was just, I think that they weren't crazy about Bill hiring me. There were probably a lot of other bass players around that could have done a better job right off the bat. Uh, and that's what I told my wife the day I auditioned. I came home and was telling her about that, and she, where does he live? I said, I don't know, Tennessee, I guess, Nashville. Well, great. We just moved back to Milwaukee. Well, look, there's got to be a half a dozen other people that can do this job. It's just an audition, that's all. Oh, don't worry, you'll get the job. It was backhanded compliment, I guess. But uh, but yeah, that you know, I didn't really. I mean, I knew the music pretty well, or so I thought. But playing it with Bill was another matter, um, and getting the feel of the beat was another matter. And then there was the culture shock of moving down to Nashville, which was not nearly as cosmopolitan as it is now. That was, 1979. Uh, it was hard to find a good place to go out to eat. Uh, and so, anyway, it was just the culture shock of that, not being able to understand people when they spoke, and them not understanding me, and those guys not being particularly crazy about having me in the first place. Um, so yeah, it was kind of a rough start for me.
For a point during your time with Bill Monroe that you thought maybe this isn't the right thing for me, or were you in it from the get-go?
Oh no, I I guess I knew that it wouldn't be easy, uh, but I also knew it was, you know, probably the best break I was ever going to get. Uh, and at least, until I got the hang of it, I, wanted to succeed at it. But it was a miserable summer, and I was not used to summertime in the South. That made it even more miserable. Uh, and uh, and then finally, we played this show down in Chatham, Alabama, way off in the piney woods, just about an hour north of Mobile. And we were there for 3 or 4 days. There was very little to eat there, uh, and there were long days.
Mm.
And that was even before Bill assigned me to selling records. So I just pretty much sat around all day, waiting to go on. And it was so miserably hot. And at the end of that weekend, like he would sometimes do, on our last set, he asked all the boys in the band to come up and say a few words. We'd been there for 4 days, and they got around to me and he said, and back here on the bass from way up in Wisconsin, Little Marky. Little Marky, would you like to get up here and say something to these nice people? And that was it. I was so miserable. And and also the guy that had gone ahead of me was like something out of To Kill a Mockingbird. And he said stuff that I found highly offensive about, uh, hope the music not too loud for y'all. And well, I'll skip what else he said, but I just had it. So when Bill said that, I stepped up to the mic. I said, "Well, thanks, Billy." And there was a long silence. And
Wow.
then Wayne Lewis said off mic, "Boss, you want me to kill him now or later?" And then the crowd cracked up. If
Mhm.
I hadn't gotten a laugh, that would have been it for me. Uh, I was I was willing to go then. And that was, I think, kind of a turning point. And I've heard Ricky Skaggs say this same thing that um, Bill would push you and he wouldn't respect you unless you got up in his face, unless you pushed back, you know. and and I think that was the case. He finally found what my limit was, and that I had one, and that I would stand up for myself at some point. And so things kind of turned after that. And I think by the time we went up and played up in Washington, D.C., it was for a presidential invite concert at Ford's Theater. And uh, and by that time, I think, I felt like I was actually in the band. Um, although when we were going to play that show, we're riding into town, and you can never find out details about anything ahead of time. But Bill mentioned that we were going to D.C. and we're going to play for the president and going to visit the White House, uh, and Baker said, "Well, I guess we better get the pelts then." Bill said, "Yes, sir." And uh, what what pelts? Well, in the summertime, everybody wore straw hats. And then when the season turned, switched to felt hats, the beavers, uh, a Stetson. Uh, and so, oh, well, geez, where can I find one of those? And Wayne told me about a couple of different stores where I might find one. But they cost like 50 or 75 bucks then. And I was at the time staying in a room where I was paying rent weekly, and I, uh, that's, I guess, about as close as I came to quitting because I realized I didn't have enough money to buy a hat. Uh, I had to call home and ask my dad to wire me some money so I could buy this damn hat. Uh, so here I am playing with the father of bluegrass music. We're going to play at the White House, and I don't even have enough money to buy a hat. So
You still have that? Do you still have the Stetson hat you played with Bill? Do you keep that, or is it long gone?
no, I do.
You
I
do.
still, and I keep it around because the band I have now, uh, we do wear hats. We don't have suits or anything, but we're a straight ahead traditional bunch, and I find I look a lot better in a hat now than I did back then, or at least the hat helps me more than it did back then. Uh, so so I keep that around in case we've got a guy that doesn't have one. So that's a spare.
Gotcha. So in your book, among the many episodes you talked about Kenny Baker a lot. And you mentioned something, said that he kind of really just tolerated you, except occasionally would have complaints about your bass playing. Do you remember what he was complaining about with your bass playing?
Mainly intonation.
Oh, okay.
Um, but then depending on who you talk to in the band, uh, you know that and to me, there are certain things like uh, folks like to play a Martin guitar, and a C note on a Martin guitar is never true unless they cheat with the open string, A string. But if you
Hmm.
see on the A string on the third fret, if that A string's in tune, that C is not true. And of course, we play a fair amount of stuff in C. So there was always that and an ongoing uh, argument about it. Although it's Kenny Baker, it's hard to argue with him. Uh, but I think that was mainly it was intonation and occasionally note choice, but intonation and then just overall, the feel of it. Um, Bill had, a really distinctive beat. Uh, and the trick there was to play way, way, way on top of the beat, not ahead of the beat, though. But the bass really had to be the very first thing. It always had a little bit of a forward lean to it. So you learn how to play that, how to play really on top of the beat, and at the same time not speed up. And I think actually that once I got the hang of it, I think Bill appreciated that I would kind of hang if someone wasn't right on it. I wouldn't just run off and leave them. I'd keep the beat and try to keep everybody together. And also, Bill, uh, with that general description, at the same time, he played a lot of rhythmic variations, different feel to the beat. The feel, like say on Uncle Pen, is different from the feel on Mule Skinner Blues or Breakdown. Uh, those all have different feels. The feel of a fiddle tune, and that's one thing that I had heard a lot of fiddle music growing up. My dad had all kinds of albums, Clark Kessinger and other old time fiddlers to bluegrass music and western swing. And so I did hear a lot of fiddle tunes, and at least Baker gave me credit for that. Well, not too bad on the fiddle numbers. Uh, that I could hear one coming, even if I hadn't heard the song. Even if I hadn't played it with him before, uh, I could hang with him on most fiddle tunes.
Yeah.
But Bill, he would mix it up, and he had a lot of different feels. This old timey kind of a swing feel for numbers like Rocky Road Blues, uh, and so all of these things had subtle rhythmic approaches, or differences. And I think after I got the hang of it, Bill appreciated that I could hear that, you know, that I would stick with him instead of just playing one way. Uh, One time, not long after I went to work for him, it's been a few weeks, and he said, "Well, you've got to." Well, I asked him actually. we were coming back from a show in New York, and he still hadn't told me whether or not I had the job. And I was wondering, should I try to bring my car down here? I had a Chevy Vega that I didn't know for sure it would make the trip. Uh, and, should I try to find something more permanent to rent or whatever? Uh, and so I asked him, am I doing all right at this? And he said, well, you've got to study on the music. I said, well, Bill, I guess I've got most of your albums. I've listened to most of them. There might be some stuff I haven't heard, but, and he cut me off. He said, but I've had a lot of sorry bass players. And so then, I asked him, well, what bass players did you like? I mean, was Howard Watts all right? Well, yeah, he was. How about Ernie Davis? And I named a couple of guys that I thought had and done a really good job with them. And I said I always thought Randy Davis played pretty well. Yes, sir. And so at the end of that, I asked him, so you know, do you think I can do this job? Do you think I've got the job? He didn't say yes. He just kind of barely nodded. And that's all the acknowledgement that I had.
So back in those days, were the band members on a weekly salary, or were you getting paid by the gig, or how did that work out?
We were paid by the day.
By the day?
And that was by each working day. I mean, per gig. So, you could go up and play in New York and Boston, be gone 4 days, and come home with $100. Uh, and then it went up to 60, and it was there for a while, 60 a day. I remember taking a West Coast tour, and we were gone 3 weeks, and I came home with $800. Uh, so that wasn't the greatest. Um, Proud to say I was one of those who was there that night that the musicians union, local 257, called a meeting for people to discuss working conditions for sidemen, traveling sidemen. I thought, well, yeah, that's me. I'll go. And Wayne Lewis was there too. And we had a quorum. And so we voted ourselves about 100% raise. Uh, and that brought it up to 110 a day, plus a per diem for days that you were on the road not working. Uh, and so Bill didn't like that much. But it's a funny thing that in the American Federation of Musicians and in Nashville, the bosses and the workers both belong to the same union. Uh, and so, um, but there were a whole lot more road musicians there than there were leaders. And so we voted ourselves a raise, and uh, we got back on the bus, I don't know, a week later or so, and uh, Bill started to bring it up, and Wayne said, well, I didn't see you there. You could have voted.
Mm.
And uh, I'll give Bill credit. He didn't have a lot to say after that. He kind of took it like a man. It's like, yeah, when he's right about that. He could have been there. And he never said anything about it after. So it was kind of a settled matter.
Um, so Bill's brother, Burch Monroe, and his brother Charlie Monroe were obviously important figures in his life, but I know he and Charlie had a split up long, long ago. Did you ever encounter Charlie Monroe in your travels with Bill, or was he just like persona non gratis at that point?
Well, I couldn't honestly tell you exactly how Bill felt about Charlie while I was with him,
Mhm.
but um, I've heard stories about how they used to fight like cats and dogs. Uh, and even when they were playing together, and then even after. Um, and Peter Rowan told me a story about um, how they were. Peter was driving the car, and they're going down Gallatin Pike, and uh, uh, Bill said, "Pointed to here, pull in here," and drove up this driveway up to the house, and uh, Bill got out of the car, and he went up and rang the doorbell. Guy came to the door, and Bill decked him just one punch, boom, and then turned and got back in the car, and okay, we can go. So Peter drove down the road a little ways. He said, Bill, who was that man? That was Charlie." So
Oh man. It's funny because both Peter Rowan and Richard Green, who were Bluegrass Boys back in the '60s, have been on my podcast. Um, so I know you knew at least knew Peter Rowan. Well, that story came from him, so you must have a relationship with Peter, right? Of some kind.
yeah. Well, I always enjoyed seeing him, still do. Uh, and when we get together, we trade Monroe stories. And it's funny that one of us can usually come up with a story that the other one has not heard yet. In spite of all of the stories, it's always surprising. But yeah, we got to be friends. I think when uh, we were at the country music festival in London at Wembley, and Peter wasn't performing there, but this was an odd thing about these shows in Europe. People do like cosplay. They come to the concert, you know, dressed like in cowboy outfits with chaps and spurs and cowboy hats and stuff like that. Kind of a different thing. And uh, Peter was there as a gaucho, and so he had a big sombrero and a poncho and pink tights and big high boots, and and he came backstage, and Bill took one look at him and just turned on his heel and walked away. That's a crazy thing. And and Peter came up to me. He said, "Hey, bud, I've got a driver, and I know a great Indian restaurant not far from the hotel. You want to go, Bluegrass Boy?" I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, you bet." And so we did, and of course, um, English cuisine to me is a contradiction in terms. But if you can go to an Indian restaurant or Asian restaurant, Middle Eastern, almost anything else, it's great. This was terrific. And so we had a good dinner, and then we sat in the pub after that for a few hours, just trading stories, you know. And so anytime I saw him after that, we would get together and have a lot of laughs. He
Yeah.
told me some great stories about when he and Richard were in the band together and what it was like traveling then.
I guess Bill Monroe had a pretty strict policy about he wasn't a big drinker, and Peter said we weren't drinking much. We were smoking a lot of pot, but I don't think Bill really knew what we were doing back in the days, '60s.
And Peter told me that they thought they were being smart, uh, going back to the rear of the bus and um, going in the restroom there. The thing is, and then blowing the smoke out the window. But the way it works on a bus is there's a slipstream, and everything they blew out the window got carried up to the front of the bus, and they had no idea. Uh, but Richard uh, carried a pack of Indian cigarettes, and if if it ever came up, he'd pull that smoke. It smells kind of funny. He'd pull out those Indian cigarettes. Oh, well, it must be these Indian cigarettes.
Yeah.
I don't know how long they thought they were getting away with it, uh, but Bill was, I think through Peter and Richard, and then people after that got some idea of what was going on around them. Uh, there was a time that we were coming back from a show in Louisville, and Butch had dropped off the bus to go hang with Sam Bush, and he was going to come back to Nashville on his own later. And so we were riding along, and Bill said, "I've got an awful headache. Do you have any BCs?" And it said, "It's powdered aspirin that they sell down south, BC powders." And I said, "Well, I don't, but I think Butch has got some in his bunk." And Bill said, "Shh, I don't want none of that kind of powder, boy."
So he was not totally naive about it.
Oh,
Oh man. So is there any kind of a Bluegrass Boys alumni club that where people who played with Monroe get together still and like hang out and tell stories? Is it just kind of if you happen to meet somebody, you say hi and tell a story? Is there a regular organized group of alumni of the Bluegrass Boys that meets?
I think that there was for a while, and there may still be somewhere. I'm not aware of one. I know at certain functions, like at the IBMA, show, the annual show, there'll be enough people around that, ex Bluegrass boys tend to find each other. And that's been my experience with that, So there used to be more events, sort of Bluegrass Boy reunions and what have you. Um, and I think that was more in like in the 90s. I don't think that happens much anymore. Might be one or two things around. Uh, but back then, I didn't want anything to do with it. Uh, I came back to Wisconsin in 1990 and was really not crazy about even playing music other than around the house or what have you. Uh, and and so I didn't pay attention to any of that. But I guess there used to be more. Um, Peter told me about uh, um, there was some, and this was back sort of in the early days of online or what have you. There would be talk groups or conversation groups, uh, and um, someone piped up about, I want to hear from the rest of the Bluegrass Boys to stand up for Jesus Christ, our Savior. And Peter said, Richard came in there, guns blazing, to point out in the strongest possible terms that not all Bluegrass Boys are Christians. So I'm
Yeah.
he's Jewish, but that kind of cracked me up. I could imagine that. I've never had a chance to meet Richard. We've just kind of bumped into each other online a time or two. Uh,
Yeah.
I would love to meet him sometime. Uh, really terrific talent, and the stuff he played with Bill back then was really out of this world. And Bill let him go. You know, he might be harder on other fiddlers, but I don't think he gave Richard much guff at all.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't play fiddle anymore. I guess physically he can't, but he's a fantastic photographer. He has a website. He takes beautiful, beautiful black and white pictures. Unbelievable.
Oh yeah, and a painter too.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Interesting guy. I love chatting with him too. So in any group of people or a band, the people take on certain roles. I mean, one person might be kind of the comedian, one might be kind of like the organizer, one's trying to always make things work right with the boss. Did you have a certain role in the band that you kind of were known for or tried to play, or you just went along with whatever was going on?
Well, my role evolved into flunky for a while, uh, where I sold the records, and uh, and then um, if we had any issues with sound, I would be the guy to go talk to the sound man or what have you. That sort of evolved, um, and uh, then later on, um, when we were on a trip to the West Coast, um, we got off the plane. We had a rental car, and Bill said, "Well, who wants to drive?" And everybody took one step back, and that left me as the volunteer. So, okay, well, I'll drive. And it turned out to be a good thing because we drove down the coast, and there were long drives in there from I think we started in Seattle or Portland and went on down, and uh, so Bill and I are listening to the radio, and baseball was on, and so happened the Yankees were playing the Brewers, my team, Milwaukee Brewers, and Bill, of course, was pulling for the Yankees, and so that was something we had in common was baseball. But anyway, the way that trip shook out, I was doing the driving and the navigating, and then we were supposed to play at Cal Polytech in Pasadena, and I just happened to guess at the right exit to get off the highway, uh, to get off of I-5. And as it turns out, get off the highway and um, everybody's grumbling about lunch. Got off the highway, found a restaurant right away. I said, "You guys go ahead. Uh, I'm going to see what I can find for a hotel." Um, so I waited until they had gone into the restaurant, and then I walked across the way to a liquor store because I figured that was a good place to get local tips. And sure enough, we were right on Colorado Boulevard, and the guy said, "Yeah, just down this way, and there's a Best Western down there, and it's about a half. It's like a couple of blocks away from Cal Poly." I said, "Oh, well, there you go." So when they came back, everybody's in a better mood, and said, "I think I've got a line on rooms," and went down and checked out the Best Western, and the price of the rooms was okay with Bill, and so we got all checked in, and then uh, he came back out, and he said, oh, "Where's the show from here?" And I pointed down the street, and you could see the building a couple of blocks down the street, and I
Hmm.
said, "Right there." "Are you kidding?" "No, sir. That's where we're playing, Cal Poly." "Well, that is really fine. We could walk there, couldn't we?" I said, "Yes, sir. You bet." And so with that trip, I became the road manager. Uh, and so he would fly.
Mm.
I would get everybody's tickets and take care of whatever needed to be done, getting in and out and what have you. And I got it down to where I could travel without any checked bags. Um, I had a old timey, garment bag like an American Tourister, and then a bag that would go under the seat. And so, like we came back from an overseas trip. I could go ahead while they were waiting on the bags. I could go ahead and line whatever it was up, customs or ground transportation or what have you. And that got to be my role after a while. That and handling the sound. And I would just walk out and check the mics by voice instead of getting everybody up there for a sound check. I'd just walk around, have them set up the way we would set up, and then just check all the mics with voice. Because with acoustic instruments, if the voice sounds okay, then the instrument should sound okay.
Yeah.
And I might maybe fudge a little bit here and there, like with the guitar mic. I'd say maybe roll a little bit of low end off of this, or with the mandolin, get that up a little bit more on the monitors, what have you. But otherwise, it took me, maybe 5 minutes. And the guys on the Doyle Lawson's band Quicksilver were laughing about it. They spent like an hour fooling around in this place. It was an arena. The acoustics were terrible. And they went round and round with this guy. And I walked out there and like took 5 minutes, and we came out and we sounded fine. So, there you go. So yeah, that sort of evolved until Bill and I had a little bit of a business disagreement about the records.
Uh,
Because I would do all the schlepping and eventually ordering, and Bean Blossom was coming up, and Bill had a big double album live at Bean Blossom, and so I ordered a bunch of those, and they back ordered them, and so we had set to go on that trip, and Bill wanted to know what happened to those Bean Blossom albums. I said, well, they're back ordered. Well, I've been charged for them. I said, yes, sir. And when they have the records available, they're going to send them. I'm not too happy about it myself, but that's the way it is. And he thought I was trying to beat him out or something. And, didn't understand or didn't acknowledge, the fact of back order. That's just the way it goes. They didn't have them in stock. And I told his secretary about that later on. Betty McInturf was always great to talk to. And she just shook her head. She said, he really has no business sense. Like, I've looked at his utility bills, and he could be, he's out on that farm, he could be paying an farm rate that
mhm.
he could be paying a flat fee and really save a lot of money, but he didn't see the sense in paying for heat in the summertime. Well,
Oh, gotcha.
uh, so anyway,
Yeah.
and then Bill was steamed about it, and I wasn't too happy about it either, because he did pay me to do it, like usually about 10%, which was a nice little bump for me, especially if we, sold a bunch of records. And so Baker's was sitting right there, and he said, well, then by God, you can sell my records, and looked straight at Bill. And so that's what I did. After that was I sold Baker's records instead. And if it was a light crowd or crummy weather or whatever it was, it was a lot easier. Baker would say, to hell with the records. Don't bother with it. And for those times, Bill, on the other hand, didn't matter how many people were there or what was going on, he wanted those records out. So that's a little different.
Right, right. So we were talking before about, playing a little right on the beat, not ahead of it, and all that kind of stuff. But I was thinking about tuning instruments because this is, of course, before the days of tuners. So would you guys tune to the mandolin, or how would you all stay in the same pitch?
Well, you pretty much have to tune to Baker.
Gotcha.
If you're playing in tune with Baker, then that's close enough. And if you weren't playing in tune with Baker, he'd let you know. Uh, I never doubted his ears. Uh, and so, uh, yeah, with nobody used electronic tuners, and a lot of people, still don't. Among the old timers, like I was in a session with Josh Graves uh, way back then, but somebody pulled out a tuner, and Josh told him, "Put that damn thing away." I ain't tuning to that, And well, for a dobro player, I guess I could see that, but also he thought he didn't think much of the results, and he thought that people relied on him too much. Just tune your own damn instrument.
Well, he's got a good point there. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about singing because I know you did sing with the band. Now you sang. Explain this to me and for my listeners here. The bass part and the baritone part. People get confused about the difference between those two. Is there an easy way to describe the difference, or does it change depending on the song and the melody and the chord and so forth?
Oh well, the definition, I guess, is might be a little bit different with well, it is different with classical music.
Right.
When people hear a baritone, that sounds like a bass to them, uh, and it and really the bass parts of Monroe's quartets are more in the baritone range as opposed to true bass singer. And my measure of that is if you can sing a low D, then you're a bass singer.
Hmm.
If you can't, then you're a baritone singer. Um, and I can never hit a low D. Uh, but but then in the bluegrass context, um, the baritone part would be the third part after the lead and the tenor. And some people might stack it up with what would be that baritone part would be between the lead and the tenor, way up high. The Osborne Brothers harmonies, for instance,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
were like that, often like that. And Ralph Stanley would use that same kind of stack on certain numbers. But generally speaking, uh, you got the lead, the tenor above, the baritone down below. The baritone is going to be um, helping to form the chords. You'd say 1, 3, 5. Well, one would be the lead. Three, I think of as and you probably have listeners to correct me on this. I'm not big on theory myself, but I believe the three would be more the tenor part, and the five being the baritone part. Uh, and so uh, and there's a little bit of a trick to singing baritone, um, because the lead and the tenor have primacy. The baritone's job in bluegrass harmony is stay out of the way. Uh, and so sometimes you have some kind of funny jumps to stay away from doubling somebody's note. Uh, and good baritone singers can do that without it sounding funny. Um, yeah. uh, and that was one thing that actually I could do because early on, well, I mean, I started out in choir and I could always sing parts. And then later on in high school, I played with groups that played like Crosby, Stills, and Nash kind of stuff. And that was one of the things I loved about with the harmonies, And so I learned how to, find harmony parts. Uh, I think with everything I know about singing, uh, I'd be pretty good if I just had a voice. Uh,
Mhm.
that's the one thing you can't learn.
Right. Do you remember playing on a song? I just heard of this song. I teach some bluegrass classes here, and the song was recommended as a song for one of our students. And it's called "I'm My Own Grandpa." And apparently, you were on a record back then with Tony Rice, David Grisman, J.D. Crowe, and Herb Peterson. Do you remember? I never heard the song. It's a crazy song. Do you remember playing on that?
I, I don't remember playing that song. I remember the session, but uh, yeah, geez, that was sort of I guess it must have been in some ways traumatic. I don't recall actually recording that number.
Yeah, it's a crazy song. And it's, they picked it out for this guy in my class who's kind of a controlled guy, and they thought it'd be a funny song for him to sing because it's so unlike him. It's the craziest lyrics I ever heard in my life. I just saw it and I saw your name on there. I said, oh, well, maybe he remembers that session, but
No, no. Well, I remember the session, but I don't remember that particular song.
yeah.
It was a kick to play with those guys. Uh, First time I ever played with Tony Rice or recorded with him, uh, I was on the way to the studio with Jerry Douglas, and Jerry asked, "Did you ever play with Tony before?" I said, "No, I guess I'm actually a little bit nervous, you know." And he said, "Oh no, no, don't be. You're gonna love playing with him. You're gonna love playing with him, and he's a nice guy, but you're gonna love playing with him." And he was absolutely right about that. He was so easy to play with, and and I tell young folks this all the time. Really great players. Uh, don't be afraid to play with really great players because they make it easy.
Mhm.
You know, they actually make it easier for you to play, and
Yeah.
it's really that way. I loved his analogy of he talked about bands will argue about whether you're speeding up or slowing down or whatever it is. He said, look at a train going down the track. You can see the cars wiggling from side to side, but as long as it's up to speed and going down the track, it's fine. And that's kind of how I think of a band sound too, and not worry if it's just not absolutely synced up.
Yeah. Interesting. I was Tony was my hero in bluegrass. He played up here at our concert series, I think 4 times. And um, I had a lot of people who played with him on my podcast because I just wanted to hear about their experiences with him. And to a man, they all said the same thing you just said, that he was the greatest player to play with. He had that pocket and made everybody else sound better, no matter what the song was. I had Jerry Douglas was on the podcast. He'd said the same thing you said, is it was like butter playing with him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, my favorite story about Tony is when we were playing the Birchmere one time. This was after Bill with the Nashville Bluegrass Band, and we were playing the Birchmere, and Tony showed up, and we were hanging around after the show, drinking several pitchers of beer and talking real big. And around 1:30 or so in the morning, uh, Tony says, "Hey, let's go on down to AMU. Let's get on the radio." And I'm like, "Oh man, no, I got no business going anywhere close to a mic." And no, man, he grabbed me, pulled me over to where his guitar was, opened up the case, and he pointed it at that. He said, look at that. That's Clarence's guitar. I say, yeah, that's what I hear. That's the greatest guitar in the world. But it can't do without a bass. And I said, well, look, I already sent the bass back to the hotel. Well, let's go get it. So, so it's January in DC, and rode over to the hotel, and I got my bass, and then I sat in the back of a pickup truck, holding on to the bass while we're going down to Georgetown to WAMU. So I was sobered up a little bit by the time we got there. It's nothing like January in DC in the middle of the night to sort of straighten you out. But I still wasn't crazy about it. And um, went in there, and they were, there was a bluegrass show going on. I guess that's what, Tony knew about that. And so we walked in, and here, out of the blue, they've got Tony Rice with the Nashville Bluegrass Band, and can we play on the air? And so it's sure. So they set up some mics for us, and we played for a little while. And I was kind of staying away from the mic, and Tony kept reaching over and pulling me in. Get in here. Get in. I need to hear that bass. And so anyway, that was a lot of fun. And then a few weeks later, we were back up in that area, and someone mentioned having heard us on the radio. And I said, well, what, were you up in the middle of the night listening to that? I said, no, they've been playing it. They had taped it. And that's still around. And if I listen to it closely, I still kind of cringe. Geez. I mean, I guess I did all right, but holy smokes.
Is that recording somewhere on YouTube?
Yeah. Yeah, all you have to do is Google Tony Rice Nashville Bluegrass Band, and it would come right up. And it goes on for a while. It's still pretty good. Uh, Nashville Bluegrass Band had it going on back then.
Was Mike Compton in the band at that point, or is that in the bluegrass band, Nashville?
Yeah, that was the original plus Stuart Duncan, and so it was Compton and Duncan, and of course Alan O'Brien and Pat Enright, and so yeah, 5 piece.
That's quite a band. So, if you could have gone back in time and sat down and played with anybody in music history, who would you choose to play with? I know you played with Monroe, which is kind of most people's main choice, but anyone you would have liked to have played with and never got the chance?
Oh gosh, I've never even. That's a great question. I've never even thought about it. Um, I mean, I had a chance, to sort of be around a lot of the first generation guys, even if I didn't play in their band. But Ralph Stanley and Jimmy Martin and you know Lester Platt was around. I did get to play a few tunes with Earl Scruggs when he did a guest spot at Bean Blossom years ago, um, and Don Reno. So I don't know. I think kind of along the same lines. What I do wish, and Joe Douglas and I had talked about this a little bit when I brought it up, but I look back on all of the people that I met or I had a chance to meet, and learn more about them, what have you. And I was just a kid trying to be cool. And it's like Jerry said, yeah, when you're like 23, 24, you don't want to seem like a fan, you know. Uh, but looking back on it, I wish I had asked these guys all these guys I played with about, more about their history and experience. Uh, for example, Gordon Terry, uh, who was a great fiddler, um, but also a lot of people might not know this, but if you go on YouTube and you look up Gordon Terry, it ain't right. Uh, he's doing rockabilly, and this is not long out of Bill Monroe's band, but he's uh, looking really good. I mean, he's more handsome than Elvis, picks great guitar, not a bad singer, and I mean, he just looks the part. And you watch that and you think, why wasn't he the next big thing? I mean, it looks like he's really got it. And so there are, people like that. I wish I had more of an opportunity to talk to Earl about some of the old days. Um, and I guess I did a little bit of that with maybe some of the ex Bluegrass boys. Like Don Reno was always really friendly. And when I first met him, it was at Bill's festival, Bean Blossom. And I went down the road just to get away from the festival park. I was a little hamburger stand, little hamburger stand down the road. And Don came in there and saw me sitting there. He said, "You one of Bill's boys, ain't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." Uh, Came up, shook my hand, down Reno. Oh, wow. He said, "Mind if I join you?" No, no, not at all. And so we talked a little bit, and he asked, and it's funny, I had breakfast once with Earl Scruggs. He asked me the same question. I got the same reaction.
Hmm.
So, how do you like working with Bill? I didn't say anything. I just kind of smiled and nodded, and they both cracked up. It's like an understandable answer. Uh, anyway, Don Reno told me some stuff about the old days when they would. Um, he said, "Bill was still pretty strict about being on time." I said, "Oh yeah." He said he didn't used to be that way. Really. He said, "Yeah, he used to be a lot looser about things." It wasn't until, like when he was really big, and then all of a sudden, in the '50s, it all went away. He started taking things a lot more seriously. But back then, he said they'd be on their way somewhere. They'd have a flat. They'd get out and Bill would haul the gloves out. And he'd want to have a game of catch. And let's toss the old Bill around here a little bit. And eventually somebody said, well, it's getting on kind of late. We guess we better fix that tire. And Bill said, "Don't worry, they'll wait." And and he was right about that. They would. They lined up around the block, but he was not at all that way by the time I worked with him. And Reno told me about they would, collect the admission. It was like a quarter. And back when the price went up to a quarter, a lot of people complained about it. But that was, like a pretty stiff price for a show then. And by the end of a trip, uh, the trunk of the car would be loaded down with coins, so that the front end sticking up and the back end is way down. And they'd open up the trunk and dig in there, and they would separate the coins into more or less equal piles, and that was your pay. Didn't count it. I just kind of scooped them into even piles, and there you went. And I imagine Bill got the bigger pile, but uh, that's how things were then.
Yeah. When you think about Bill Monroe's career, starting out early on with his brother and splitting up, and then having all that success with the Bluegrass Boys and people coming and going and being so popular, and then when rock and roll and all that came in, he really had a long period of not being popular. It's almost amazing that he kept going well into his 70s, I guess, still playing the music despite all the setbacks. It's kind of incredible.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, he was in his 70s by the time I joined him. Uh, and that's, every once in a while you have a sort of disturbing perspective on the passage of time. Uh, and it still shakes me up a little bit to think that right now I'm older than Bill was when he hired me.
Mm.
And to me, then he was an old guy. So I guess that makes me old, but it still kind of shakes me up a little.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 72, and I can't imagine living that grueling life of a traveling bluegrass band, what it was like for Monroe back then. I mean, I'm not that I'm healthy and good shape and everything else, but I just can't imagine doing it at this age or even older.
Oh, no, I know it. And, he had opportunities. I mean, he didn't, it didn't have to be as tough as he made it on himself, but he would take any kind of routing there was, you know, when I think, other people maybe had more sense would have turned stuff down, but he wouldn't, apparently, he would not turn anything down if the money was there. And so we had some incredible routing. Like my favorite of all time is still we played in Chatham, Alabama. Uh, like I said, 50 miles north of Mobile. And the next night we were in Crandon, Wisconsin, which is like three-quarters of the way up into Wisconsin uh, at a festival there. And then uh, the next evening in Cincinnati. Uh, and it's a pull from there too. And from there to Honolulu. And we
My God.
got off the plane and went straight to the Waikiki Shell, did a sound check, came back, went to the hotel, everybody showered and shaved, and then got back out to the Shell and did the show that night. Uh, so that's still, I think, my all-time favorite.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. So do you, after you left the band, did you have any contact with Mr. Monroe, um, after that?
I did, but um, it was slow to go. He didn't speak to me the times that I would see him.
Mm.
Uh, for I don't know, I guess a couple or 3 years maybe, um, which just goes to show I was not nearly as good as Lester Flatt. He didn't talk to Lester Flatt after he left the band for about 20 years. Uh, but for me, it was 2 or 3 years. Um, and then we were playing a show up in Delaware and found ourselves at the same spot backstage. Uh, and just outside the perimeter there. And I was standing there watching our somebody was bringing our bus around, and we'd just gotten this bus. It was an old GMC 1957 GMC, what Greyhound used to run, and that was before the engine blew, and so it was just belching black smoke, and and it was before we had it had belonged to a gospel group called the Sound Masters, which was sort of primitively painted on the side of the bus. And so, all in all, the thing looked like hell. And so, somebody's bringing the bus around, taking a big circle out in the field, and found myself standing there close to Bill, watching it. And I turned to Bill. I said, "Boss, how do you like my new bus?" And he just kind of smiled a little bit and nodded. And then I asked him, well, I told him, Ben, sound pretty good. How are you doing? How are you faring? And he said, not bad. not bad. Feeling pretty good. And that was about the extent of our conversation, but that broke the ice. Uh, and so he was civil after that, and downright friendly. The last time I saw him, he was playing a show up here in Madison, and um, I went around ahead of time. I saw the bus parked out in front of the theater, and I walked up, knocked on the door, and Bill came to the door, and he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I thought maybe I'd see if Blake Williams is around." "Well, don't you want to see me?" "Well, yeah, sure. If you got a few minutes, well, come on then." And so I came on the bus, and he was kidding me. He said I had a beard. He said, "Looked like you could have got a job up here that pay you enough to buy a razor." And I said, "Well, it's cold up here. I've got to have this." And so we chatted for a while and just caught up. And um, he said, "Now uh, tonight in the show, if I call your name, can you get up to the stage?" I said, "Yes, sir. I guess I can." Uh, he said, "Well, all right then. I'll let you know. You just listen real hard." So I don't see how I could, be in here and not hear y'all. Uh, so yeah, I'll be there. And he did. He called me up on stage, and I wound up playing part of the last set with them, including the closing theme, "Watermelon Hanging on the Vine." And of course, we played that so many times on the Opry. Uh, Old Wayne had there. I guess it was Tom Ewing then. Uh, but all he had to do was play that intro, and I knew what was coming next. And we wound up in good order. And anyway, yeah, then we're standing around afterwards, and I was shaking Bill's hand, thanking him for showing me a good time. And uh, he said, "Well, that sounded fine. Anytime you want a job now, you just come right on back." And Billy Rose was playing bass with him, and I just looked at Billy and said, "Well, thank you." And then later on, and it's funny because not long after I joined the band, uh, we stopped and had breakfast in Asheville, North Carolina, and Randy Davis came around and met us there. And that's the only time that I ever got to meet Randy, actually, maybe at the festival here and there. But and Bill said the same thing, and Randy looked at me kind of the same way, and had the same thing say later. He said, uh, "Don't pay that any mind. He he does that to everybody. He's he's not going to hire me, and if he did, I wouldn't go anyway." But
Yeah. Wow. Well, that sounds like a good place to end. We've been going almost 90 minutes here, and you've just got some fantastic stories. And I'm going to encourage people again to buy your book or get it out of the library. It's called On the Bus with Bill Monroe by Mark Hembree. And you've told a few of the stories in the book, but it's just an endless source of interest to anybody who's a bluegrass fan or a Monroe fan, history of the music, and a lot of other stuff too in there. It's very well written. It moves right along, and it's a great book. So thank you, Mark, for coming on and enlightening us a lot. It was really fun chatting with you.
it's available, by the way, on Amazon, and also Illinois University Press. It's available at both of those places, and fine bookstores nationwide uh, can probably order it.
Yeah, I'm sure people can find it On the Bus with Bill Monroe. And if you're out in Wisconsin, look up Mark Hembree. He's probably playing with his band somewhere out there, and go give him a shout. But anyway, I thank you again, Mark, for coming on. It's been fascinating chatting with you, and maybe I'll meet you in person someday. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Come to the show on February 20th in Skokie, Illinois. At
Okay, I'll put it on my calendar.
Violin Shop in Skokie.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for talking.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right. Bye bye. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.